Hi again then guys, and welcome to the 60th episode of GT Masters, again featuring a car from Gran Turismo Sport, a newer version of an existing car, an existing lineage, and one of the most oversaturated vehicles, I would say, of the Gran Turismo franchise. Not that it's a bad car, not at all, but we just don't need as many variations of this car as we have. In particular, the Skylines are way oversaturated on Gran Turismo. There are some great ones, there are lots of great ones, but we don't need every colour with every different type of rim and every type of bonnet and every type of chin splitter. We just need the ones which are the most outstanding. Now, as far as GTRs go, the R35 GTRs, that is, those are a bit better in terms of the selection given on Gran Turismo. We have the Academy Edition, the Scholl's Motorsport GT3 car, we have the GT500 vehicles, which are hugely popular, the road versions in Spec V or Black Edition or Nismo form, and this car is the logical next step. It's the new, facelifted R35 GTR, but in particular not the road version, but rather the Group 4 racing version. Now, there is also a Group 3 racing version of the GTR in the Gran Turismo Sport Beta, but it's the Team Scholl's, which we already have. I've already reviewed that car on Gran Turismo 6, so there's no real need in revisiting that one again. This one, however, is not just new, but it's significant, and one of the reasons why is because this car offers something which I've extolled the virtues of in its equivalent car on Gran Turismo 6, because I would say the closest thing to this car on Gran Turismo 6 is the Academy Edition GTR. It looks similar to the Team Scholl's, but it doesn't have a body kit, it costs 500,000 credits, it's rear-wheel drive, and it's the fastest GT class race car in the entire game. It's capable of over 280 miles per hour when fully tuned. It can literally take on supercars, and on Gran Turismo 6, for a GT class race car to be capable of that is very impressive. This car takes that kind of potential, not necessarily specifically for top speed, but in other ways in particular, into the next step of Gran Turismo, because that version, the Academy car, has some very distinct advantages. There are two in particular. One is something which I've mentioned a number of times about a number of cars, not just racing ones, but road versions as well, and that is the problems that come from having a big car. Not a heavy car, a big car, and there's a big difference. The Audi V16 Streamliner is not a heavy car, it weighs 1 tonne, but it's a big car, and it's very awkward to get it around corners. Now, that of course is not just due to its size, it's also the steering, but it illustrates the point. A physically large vehicle will always be cumbersome, even if it's lightweight, simply because it's more difficult to overtake an opponent if your car is taking up half the track, and the GTR is already a very big vehicle. In racing form, it gets even bigger. It has a huge body kit, and although it's not an issue most of the time, I guarantee on certain tracks you really notice that size. Somewhere like Monaco or London, for instance, it's a big car to be taken through those streets. The Group 4 version shown here, just like the Academy car, is exactly the same as the road version. It's no wider whatsoever. But the secondary advantage is that people don't expect a car that doesn't look as impressive to be as impressive. It's the whole sleeper car concept, and often you'd think of sleeper cars as being predominantly to do with road cars. Understandably so, that usually is the case, be it sedans or hatchbacks, which are much faster than they look, but it can kind of apply to race cars as well, but in a slightly different way, because when you look at a race car, you don't think it's going to be slow. Of course not, it's a race car. But if you're in, for instance, a Group 4 car that has more heavy modifications, or even a Group 3 machine, a lower end Group 3 machine perhaps, and you look at this GTR, you're not necessarily going to be threatened by it, because it looks like a normal GTR with some stickers. And that's essentially what it is on the surface. But underneath, what they've done is lowered the weight, increased the grip, the brakes, the suspension, the downforce has all been improved, and what you've got is essentially taking a vehicle which offers an incredible all-round package. You've left the performance already fantastic, and you've focused on the aspects of its personality and its character which weren't as good. For instance, the GTR is very heavy, This one isn't. It weighs 1,363 kilos, and even though it's running basically stock power, 463 and 398 foot-pounds of torque, it's so much quicker because of how much lower the weight is. Not necessarily just in a straight line, especially not top end, because you have the added downforce to work with, but through the corners. Of course, the other upgrades make a difference as well. Suspension, brakes, diff, the downforce, as we mentioned before, but the weight makes such a massive difference, because no matter how good the rest of the parts are, if you are physically trying to slow down something that weighs nearly 2 tons, which is what the GT-R essentially is, well over 1,700 kilos, it's simply going to be more efficient at stopping and turning if you're carrying less weight. It really is as simple as that. So although this one overall is not as quick as the Group 3 Team Scholl's version, of course not, that's why it's in the Group 4, in the Group 4 class, it is strong. Very strong. Now you already know it's going to be great as the street version, in whichever class it turns out to be, N500 or N600, but in racing form, this is a very dominant force in the Group 4 class. It's definitely one of the most outstanding cars in that category, and if you're looking for those cars as you work through Gran Turismo Sport's career mode that you need to buy, you know the type that I mean. As you play through each Gran Turismo game, especially after you've played it that first time, you can look back over the experience and think, well, I could have just bought that, and that would have basically covered most of the career. Every Gran Turismo game has a certain car or cars like that. This, I think, is going to be one of those cars for Gran Turismo Sport, because it remains to be seen whether or not you'll only be allowed to race in a specific category with a specific category of car, or if you'll be able to, for instance, take a Group 4 car into a Group 3 career mode race. If you can, then this is one of those cars which could actually remain competitive even in that category. Now, of course, to a level. You're not going to beat M6 GT3s and McLaren 650Ss with it, but you could take on something like an Evo Group 3 machine, or an Impreza Group 3, or an Alpha 4C on certain tracks with certain drivers, due to the innate potential which the R35 already has, which is then compounded on by lowering the weight and improving all of the parts which aren't necessarily visually apparent, but which make a huge difference around the track. So overall, this is definitely a car to keep your eye out for on Gran Turismo Sport, and it was one of the best cars of the beta. But overall, that's it for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.